it's not just, are you able to read words? Are you able to read those words, apply them with independent thought, be able to move forward with those things, right? Same with numeracy. Are you able to not just do that math problem, but are you able to apply it to certain parts of life? And I would venture to say that there was a time when a high school diploma meant a lot more than what it does now. I'm telling Black people, and brown people can listen to this, Asian people, white people, poor, anybody can listen to this, but I'm talking to Black people. If we want what we say we want for our people, we have to stop putting milk in these broken ass refrigerators and being surprised that kids keep getting food poisoning. You just have to. And at some point, if you keep feeding your child spoiled milk with no other recourse, then you are the abuser, not the refrigerator. And all my reports come back to the same thing. Where is your agency? These are your kids. This is our community. What are we doing despite maybe with some great schools, but regardless of where these folks are, what are we doing to safeguard and make sure that these things don't continue to happen? How much more information and data do you need? Do these kids have to have more courage than the adults in their city over and over and over and over again? That's where I leave that. We leaving our kids to fight a battle on their own, and it's kind of jacked up.
It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free. It's another episode of Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you will be freer after this hour with the brothers and me. Today's a very special day because we have a very special guest back again. I had to do this twice because we had to re-record, so let me get the intro right. It is the King of Chicago, the Prince of Oakland, and the God of Paducah. It is the one and only Dr. Charles Cole III. Brother, welcome.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. I don't want none of that smoke. You put me in, you about to get me having issues with people in Chicago, Oakland, and Paducah, brother. I just lived in all those places, but I'm really happy to be here, man. I'm humbly from those places. No, I'm not the king, prince, or god.
All right, y'all. Well, listen, let's talk about this report that Charles Cole did. Charles, you be doing reports pretty often throughout time. So first of all, we should tell people the name of the report and where they can find it, because it'll be amongst your other reports, I'm sure.
Absolutely, man. It's the Oakland 2023-24 report, but the subtitle is Proficiency Over Pageantry. And you can find it in a lot of places. You can go to energyconverters.org, our nonprofit website. You can go to my personal website, charlescoleiii.com. But you can also find it on our partner's website. So on Brightbeam, it is available there. And you want to sign up there because when you go and you find it, you can, if you put in your email address, we'll be able to keep you updated with everything that's happening and what comes from the report. So we did a better job this time of putting it as far and wide as we could.
So tell us, what's the headline of the report? What did you most get out of it?
Yeah, man. I think the headline for me was it was the subtitle. Is it, do you want proficiency or do you want pageantry? And there is an issue, right? And if you know the history of Oakland and a lot of other places, like the Civil Rights Office came and investigated us a while back, and they saw that there were too many Black kids being suspended and our grades and things were low, and it was racist. Basically, they saw these things, and so districts do what districts do. And I used to work for the district, and they started to do things like in-school suspension to fix those numbers instead of fixing the problem. But another thing that we would see happen was grades started to be inflated. And so, like I, for instance, graduated with like a 383 or 3 something, like a high GPA. But then when I got to college, I was remedial everything. Well, how does that work? What do you mean, right? And then when you start to understand curriculum and look at things and look at quality of education, it's like, oh, because I'm mastering work that's multiple levels behind. And if people aren't asking those questions, then how would you know? Like, why would a regular parent that doesn't work in education think anything different if their child comes home with great report cards, great behavior, gets all these awards at school? Why would you even think to ask if that child is proficient? And so that's kind of the where that started. And we had these very high achieving young people in Energy Converters talk to 350 other high achieving young people. And 80%, 75, something like that percent of those kids thought they were proficient in English language arts, and like 60, 70% thought they were proficient in math, where it came out to be more like 20% of them more proficient. So we want to start off by dispelling the notion that our kids lack confidence. These kids are very confident. These kids saw themselves as high learners, high achievers, and they saw themselves not just as language students like that mastered the language. They also saw themselves as math scholars. And to find this stuff out was devastating for a lot of them.
I mean, first, can we just all give it up for student driven research? Uh, right?
Thank you,
And
Ed.
and did you notice Sharif didn't say nothing? He just sat there like he's just like whatever, you know.
No, no, no. I mean, I'm thinking about two things, but go ahead.
And also participatory research, period, because people study us, but we don't study us all the time. So this is what I've always loved about your work, Charles, is it's for us, by us, right? Not like some whack 80s FUBU, but like some up
You
like
just coming in killing everybody today.
Listen, FUBU went off the tracks, but at least now we study ourselves. We put out our own. We even fund our own research at times. So it's us doing it for us. Anyways, what was the problem though, Charles? Like when you say people think that they have a much better, the grades are better than the other information that they get. Who's doing what? Where's the crime? Tell me, there's a crime in there somewhere. Where is it?
Crime, yeah.
Yeah, there's a crime. Let's talk like a crime podcast, you know.
I was gonna say, Chris, you're very good at this because my mind never went to that place. But here's what I think. Here's my theory, just with everything that I'm seeing. I think that as somebody who grew up going to school in Oakland or just in rough areas, right? Like there are some classes that have really severe behavioral problems. And there's a lot of kids that's trying to learn. And, we're trying to figure out like, okay, do you suspend or do you not suspend? Is it racist to suspend kids? Is it racist to not suspend kids and punish all the other kids? Whatever the case is. And I think subconsciously, I think a multitude of things are happening. I think smart kids that have good behavior are being rewarded for good behavior. I think it's like, look, this kid shows up, they try, they don't give me a hard time, I'm going to show some love. I think the second thing of it, man, is I think honestly, and we have Sharif on here, so he can probably talk to us a little bit more. I don't think all of our teachers are being properly trained and supported to do their own audits and also to make sure that the work that they're able to give is actually on grade level. I think that a lot of teachers, I don't think people are being malicious. I think some people are actually, oh, this is the curriculum I got. I'm not supposed to be teaching science. I got hired to teach this, but now I'm in this class. Yo, we're going to do this homework. Did you turn in all your homework? Did you do your test? Cool. And I think the other thing is when kids are on the tether, right? Like between a C- and a D or a D and an F, I think that, I think a lot of people they want to see people succeed and see young people succeed. I think they will do a bump up instead of like also making sure that there's a general like grasp of the curriculum that they're teaching. I don't think in grade school, like it's not like college. I don't think high school teachers get joy out of failing students. And not saying that professors do, but professors are just like, yo, you gonna
That's
show up or
exactly
you
what
not.
you said, but it's all right. We know what you mean.
I'm just saying, right? Like I'm just saying it's as some. I'm just trying to keep it real, right? I think I think teachers are rooting for their students. Like, so again, I'm not saying people are being malicious. So when you say crime, I think that's why I'm trying to make sure I answer it well, because I don't want us to get blamed for, bashing teachers. But I do think that there are, when you start to look at that curriculum and ask teachers, hey, is this on grade level? I don't think a lot actually know. And we know this because we actually talked to some of them. So I just wanted to, that's kind of what it is.
I still think there's a crime somewhere. So Ish and Sharif, I'd love to hear from y'all too, because on one hand, grades are about what the teacher gives, but when we say that it's not matching up with other things, I mean, we give standardized tests and we find a gap between the two. We find grades and then we find a gap between the standardized test. And then the teacher tells us the standardized test is bad. And we're having this argument just in general. Some of us agree with the test, don't agree with them or whatnot, but we wouldn't know. Right? Like, a A in one school might be a D in another school. A C in one school might be a A in another school. Or you might have a teacher that thinks you just need a hug, so she's going to give you a B on some shoddy D work, and you can walk around thinking I'm a B student, and no, you're a D student, right? But it's not until we do the test. So where do y'all think we should get our information from? Like, how do we answer the question how our kids are doing?
Great. I mean, you laid out a lot of complexities into the issue. And one, I think, interrogating mindsets helps out with a whole lot of like what you described, right? And what Cole described. Shout out to Cole. He's like 27 with his own website too. But we'll talk about that later.
I wish I was.
The whole idea of having, and it starts with, when I say mindset, I'm talking about like low expectations. Like, what can kids achieve both behaviorally and academically? And you see it. Some is malicious, but it may not be, voiced in the same way, right? So when people, I don't often quote Bush, but when he says the soft bigotry of low expectations, and I still got to figure out who he got that from. Somebody gave him that language.
Like it wasn't
right?
him.
It wasn't him, right? So I still haven't figured out
who it was. It was Peggy Noonan. Awesome. Peggy Noonan.
Thank you.
One of the best speechwriters of all time. She could.
Okay.
Yeah, she also gave the other Bush, the 1,000 points of light. So.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Because I'm like, that ain't you, but somebody gave you a really great description of what occurs. I just hate that it came out of his mouth and he's like the one recognized for it. But we've said similar things all the way from, Carter G. Woodson and beyond, right? But like just how that was termed for people to really kind of, try to understand what we continue to describe. So that's one. There are others. And Lisa Delpit talks about this in Other People's Children, right? Where she describes how some people are just like, well, I wouldn't be, you've suffered as a people, as a child. Your home life is XYZ. So you know what? I'm just going to lower everything. I don't expect anything from you because of whence you have come. And so a lot of it starts there, and yes, there's tons of research about like the need for high quality material that's addressed to standards, that's not just thrown together because a publisher wants to make their millions. Like, what is high quality material? What is the material that supplements and connects? If that material doesn't have it, it should. But if it doesn't, what's the whole curriculum shouldn't be what some publisher gave you. The curriculum should be, how do we help a child become smarter, faster, stronger, so that they can free themselves, be literate, be a problem solver, connect to their community, understand history, to understand the future. All of those things is like what the curriculum and the ecosystem should look like. But when you start off with the low expectations, either I detest your community and you can't do it, or I think I love you and I'm lowering expectations. But we know the people that we love, we feel that we're accountable for their success. And that's, again, another part of the root of, if I don't feel accountable for your success, not just that year, because when I was a teacher, I felt responsible also for their subsequent years. So there is a crime going on.
There's a real crime, right? Yeah. Like, I mean,
we're talking about millions of kids.
Millions of kids who, it's not just about today, it's about what's going to happen for them later, right? When you're a young person, when you're a kid, you can't always see what's going to happen to you 2 years from now. But the adults around you are like, boy, if you keep doing this or if you keep doing that, I'm telling you, by about 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now, and the kid doesn't get it, but you get it. So Charles, you see these type of numbers, and you're like, in your mind, you could probably predict trajectory, like what's going to happen.
But you know what, Cole? I mean, sorry, Cole, I'm going to hear that too, and Chris. But I think more importantly than telling a kid, if you keep doing this, this is what's going to happen to you. Adults should be saying, if I keep doing this, this is what's going to happen to you. That's the most important, kind of statement that adult educators, those adjacent to education, policymakers should really be saying. If I keep doing this, this is what's going to happen to the children. Because we're telling them, if you keep doing this, if you keep passing this policy, if you keep underfunding, if you keep not having accountability, this is what's going to happen. And we see it generation after generation after generation.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that there's a few, here's the thing. Because I've been to so many schools around the country, I've been in schools where there may not have been a lot of Black teachers, but the majority of schools I went to, it was mostly Black, if not all Black. And I think that we don't actually have enough conversation about our own belief in our own people and what could necessarily happen. And like, if you have that potential to like be able to do this. And, I saw that a lot, man. I saw that there was a lot of low expectations around. I told you, I got called a mini thug in training when I was in the 5th grade, getting the bus tickets from the front because I lived in the shelter and they had to give me my bus tickets. And the lady just said it in front of me, right? Like it just didn't matter. And so, and that stuff, that stuff kind of stays with you in certain type of ways. The other thing that came up, and Sharif, I think this will be one for you. And this is where I said, Misha Mosley gave you a nice shout out, and Marquise, was we had to also talk about the issue of those really talented Black male teachers that get put in these schools, whatever type of school, and then they become the repository for Black kids with behavior issues. And then at the end of the year, they lose a job because their classroom isn't being as productive as one would like to see it. And we had a lot of Black teachers there, where I said that in my talk. There was some suits there too. I felt like I said some things that they couldn't say, but they really, really felt, right? Like there's immense pressure. And Chris used to talk about this on 8 Black Hands. Like, why would I want to go into this profession when it's just so set up for me to fall into trap after trap after trap? And if I'm trying to do my job, it makes me a target. If I'm passionate about kids, then I'm over aggressive. If I'm too nice and trying to be accommodating, then I'm predatory, or whatever the case is, right? And it was just all these issues came up in the discussion around this report. And that's why I think I'm most proud of this one, because everybody can see it. Like now, even if you're the parent and you're hearing this stuff, now that there's a battery in your back. You now have a responsibility to ask, hey, I know my kid got all A's or all B's or whatever, but are they proficient? Can we have a conversation about proficient? And if you now are running the teachers that can't give you that conversation, or can't tell you those numbers, now we have a deeper issue that's starting to be uncovered in places like Oakland. And San Diego just had the same report come out. We just covered it on the South Star Classroom. The same thing. So, it's not by accident or coincidence. And that was focusing on more Latino kids. So it's not just happening to Black kids. It's not just happening it's happening across this country, but we're still patting everybody on the back because graduation rates are higher. Dropout rates might have dropped, and grades look better. But you can put a lot of makeup on the pig. It's still swine.
Now, just, Ish, I do want to come to you on this because we've talked a lot about the testing, where we get our information from. But I mean, my question now is an honest one. If you can't trust grades and you can't trust tests, where you can get your information from? And to add a little piece to this, Charles, when you just said it's not Black and it's not just Latino, Learning Heroes did a national report on this and found out that everybody, white parents, think that their kids are doing better than they're doing. 92% of white parents believe their kids are on track, and only for reading specifically, and only something like 30% tops of their kids are. Yet they're walking around every day thinking we're all good, like they're all learning and whatever. So, Ish, how do we arm ourselves with real data then? Where's the information coming? If you can't trust grades, can't trust test scores, then what can you trust?
Well, first, I got to say that, when we think about even what the purpose of education is, right? A lot of folks already peep game on the slick, maybe not consciously. And this is reflected when folks recognize that schooling a lot of the time acts as a socialization process. So where your child is socialized, what neighborhoods, what type of friends, what type of neighborhood you live in income-wise, that's usually a high indicator of how successful a student does in the sense of traditional academics. But and even test scores, right? But when we're talking about how does this relate to our children are the canary in the coal mine. Our children are dying, suffocating, and all those things. And that's just a reflection or a smaller microcosm of what we're seeing generally as a society where most people don't read. Most people don't spend the time to actually engage in deep critical thought, I would argue, at all. And so we live in an age where it's like click a button, maybe generate it through AI. And there's like that type of like thinking of quick, let me check off this box and move forward is being more reinforced, right? And if you cheat and get away with it, then God bless you. You did the right thing. That's the American way. But when it comes to our children, languishing in these buildings too much across the country, and schools, and not only city schools, but suburban schools, rural schools, and they're being neglected because of paternalism. They're being neglected because of racism. But that's just a reflection of how our society is structured and oriented. So of course we can point to certain examples at these schools across the country and be like, look, these Black kids are doing real well. And they're proficient, and they're going to be headed fast track. And these kids over here, you know, those are the middle track, you know. But that's how I think sometimes we're not honest about how this society is structured. Because if you look at the very structure of it, what we're describing right now is just a reflection of how it structured itself. And that's what I would argue. So when we say we can't trust the grades in the schools or even the test scores, for me, it becomes more of a question of, can we even trust that we're even engaging in what is truly what is education? Or are we just going through a process of what is known as schooling, and that we're effectively socializing our children into a system that has a mentality that they are unable to do it on the same level as other children of different races?
So I want to push you on this just a little bit. Because one, I don't think we got there to like where we get our data from in that. So you running for mayor, I got it. I caught you. But here's what I say about that. Sometimes you have two kids that live in the exact same society and zip code and are structured in exactly the same way. And you have two teachers in one building where teacher A is getting kids pushed further and further and further down the road, and the teacher B is still at Christmas time not getting through a third of what she's supposed to be getting through, right? You have two schools in similar places where the kids are both in the same, they're in the same society, the way things are structured. They're living in the same zip code and whatever, and school A and school B are doing different things. Like they're getting different results. So at some point, it does come down to whatever you think education is. There are just some folks that are doing better at it with the same kids than others. There's teachers that are doing better than each other. There's schools doing better than each other's, and then there's whole cities and districts with the same types of kids. There's no such thing as the same kids, right? Because all kids are different. But at least it's it's pretty close. Then what?
Well, similar demographics, and I agree. Obviously, I don't want to oversimplify the complexities associated with this, and even how do we even articulate if you're not co-signing simply test or the grades in the school building, right? I recognize that. At the same time, education within itself has lost a lot of value since we've moved towards this direction, right? And when I say move towards this direction, moving towards a direction with a heavy emphasis on proficiency in math and reading. As a result, a lot of the times in many school districts across the country, as a result of that, humanities is being neglected, right? Our students aren't learning about the world. They're not learning about civics, right? They're learning like a very focused track where I would say that ends up becoming a perverse incentive. And we see this with a lot of the cheating scandals that happened when it first got implemented in the early 2000s. Now, I'm not saying that testing is not important. There is some place for where folks need to know where their students are actually at and compared to other students nationally and everything. But I also would double down and argue the way that we're orientating ourselves towards handling that in the last 2 decades has actually been detrimental overall to our children's education and their access to the opportunities that education provides.
The rest of you brothers say. The rest of you brothers jump in. I'm beating them 1 point to death, but I mean, Charles, your report basically says there's a difference between grades and proficiency, right? So my mind goes to, okay, let's talk about the proficiency part. How do we know what we know? What does that mean? I think people are confused even about the word, like what the word means, proficiency.
Yeah, and I can simplify it, man. Like, there are different levels as far as grades are concerned. Are you able to, if we're talking about literacy, it's not just are you able to read words? Are you able to read those words, apply them with independent thought, be able to move forward with those things, right? Same with numeracy. Are you able to not just do that math problem, but are you able to apply it to certain parts of life? And I would venture to say that there was a time when a high school diploma meant a lot more than what it does now. There was a time where, you know, if you did well in high school and you didn't go to college, you still were on track to have a pretty good life in the middle class. And I think that that's kind of diminished a little bit. I look at this a little bit differently. And I'm gonna be very honest with y'all. Y'all are my brothers, man, my OGs. I'm gonna just be, look, I write these and I give my policy recommendations for the school building, but it's the school building. And this is more of a call to the community, the larger holistic piece. I'm giving you ample evidence as community, as those religious institutions, as those community organizations, as those elders. I'm blowing the horn, right? This is the blue light in the hospital that somebody is on their deathbed. Like, I'm showing you all these things, and we have to take more accountability as a community for that village. What does that look like? And the model that I built a long time ago, like, it was one that was interdependent on each other, where you had a school building, but you also had those religious institutions, you had mentorship, you had elders, you had community orgs. And when one was faltering, let's say in this case, the school building, those other spots would increase and pick up a lot of that slack, right? Like there's a lot of things in Sharif. Like, I just love Sharif. I like being around Sharif, like, but I like when I meet his community, when I meet his barber or the person that's taking care of me or with his mother, like, even if his school was lacking, which it probably wasn't, these other things were so rich that it was able to push him forward in different ways. And I'm telling Black people, and brown people can listen to this, Asian people, white people, poor, anybody can listen to this, but I'm talking to Black people. If we want what we say we want for our people, we have to stop putting milk in these broken ass refrigerators and being surprised that kids keep getting food poison. You just have to. And at some point, if you keep feeding your child spoiled milk with no other recourse, then you are the abuser, not the refrigerator. So that's how I'm kind of been looking at, and all my reports come back to the same thing. Where is your agency? These are your kids. This is our community. What are we doing despite maybe with some great schools, but regardless of where these folks are, what are we doing to safeguard and make sure that these things don't continue to happen? How much more information and data do you need? Do these kids have to have more courage than the adults in their city over and over and over and over again? Or do I mean, that's where I leave that. We leaving our kids to fight a battle on their own, and it's kind of jacked up.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, I think all this is, I think it speaks, the question itself, Chris, I think is so layered and complicated. Like, okay, as a parent, where do I get my information from? And we see for parents who are like, hey, you know what? I'm going to educate my own kid. They're vilified, right? And, maybe a little less now, but I remember when homeschooling was initially, at least when Black folks started doing, oh my gosh, it was like a level of contempt that, when people, and derision when people just talked about this, right? And then you have other families who are actually asking questions. And what happens to them? What's their experience of coming to the school or challenging, the system, and the system, I'm saying, like, whoever represented me as a principal, the teacher, what is their pushback? Like, what do they experience, right? So, like, the things that you're raising, even the people who are doing it, even if it's, and often the problem is it's often not done in an organized manner across parents, because it's across so many different systems, so many different grades, so many different schools, right? You have hundreds of schools in an area or whatever, right? So all of these things, it's not that people aren't asking, but a lot of times it's not asking this organized way. I remember, Cole did a op-ed, and then we were interviewed for an op-ed about, like, what's your parents ask at report card conferences? Because they get to schools, report card cards are handed out, and then just like, hey, don't just accept their report card. Here's like 6 questions just to ask, right? And as a principal, we used to give these out to families, as part of coming in and welcome. Hey, here's a question. If you get stuck or you just want to probe, here's a couple things to ask the teacher. We told the teacher they're gonna ask this, because it again goes back to the grades, inflation, and what can my child do? All right, they got an A. What can they do? What is the skill that they have? Both the skill as far as the interpersonal, is it communication skills? Is it more of an academic? Like, what are those things? And I think that I don't know of a space where these type of things have been organized in a way. When it happens, it's happening either outside, hey, school reform, we're gonna, do this, or it's the school, hey, we're gonna change this and fix this. But when have you seen like just parents organize in a way and like, hey, here are the questions we have? Because they see the outcomes. They're like, wait a minute, my kids don't have as many options once they graduate school as I thought they would. What their skill level and what their aspirations are for my child, they're not matching. So we see this, but organizing it in a way to actually push the system in a sustained, meaningful way, that's where the challenge really, really comes. And then you get all the distractions and all the things that are springing. Oh, here's the answer. Here's the answer. Here's the answer. Here's the answer. Right? Like,
you just took it somewhere where I think it gets a little bit problematic and provocative just in one way. And that is in this thing that we call parent organizing all across the country. There's always this conversation on whether it's authentic or not, or whether it's true or not, or whether parents are being used. And for years I've had this thing where I've said, like we got to stop putting parents in t-shirts and call that the sum total of our revolution, right? Like what y'all just said to me sounds pretty practical. We need to make sure that there are action guides, like what you just said Cole did, like on conference night, here's what you ask. Here's arm yourself. What's going on in your life? Because we got a page for that. Here's your page on you got conferences tonight, 5 things to ask. Don't leave until you hear these 5 things. The number 1 of the 5, if you only get a few minutes and you don't have enough time, ask this one.
This is the asterisk.
Yeah. Now that's parent organizing to me, because like if I can get 50 parents doing that and then 1,000 and then a city full of them, that's better than marching on Washington, every couple of years or whatever, like the marching and the yelling and we need choice, bro, what we need? We need parents rolling up on schools doing exactly what y'all are saying right now. That's what we need. That's the real, when I say the revolution will be literate, I'm tired of the performative, showy, picture taking parent organizing. I'm even tired of the going up and sitting with state representatives and getting in the room and nothing changes, but you feel good because you got in the room with somebody who's elected. Meanwhile, everything we're talking about today, Charles's report, what Ish and you are talking about, just in terms of we got to watch, we got to pay attention. We have to have, parenting means something different when you start getting armed like this. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I mean, this is. I think this is the deeper level of the conversation, that a report like this that Cole's pointing out connects to the lived history and experiences that we have in communities, and then the next step. So, I wish there was a point where we went from organizing to actual mobilization, which it sounds like that's what you're describing, right? Because then it's like that unification of message, staying on, people talk about staying on brand. Like, all right, let's stay on brand of like, we're taking care of our children. That's the brand. That's the only effing brand I care about. Like, how are we doing with the children? Now, imagine these questions that, you're describing. Imagine if every imam, every pastor, everybody who has a following are united around, here are the things that we're going to be pushing for. Here's what we're going to share with our followers, our congregation, our people. And we're all kind of centered. The problem is it just keeps getting splintered with every time somebody comes in, whether, more choice, less choice, public school, like that's all the distraction, because right now, no matter what you have, Black kids are still struggling in these places, whether it's a private school in the Tony suburb, you can go to and hear about Black kids and the racism that they experience. If it's the magnet school, that's choice, which is choice, right? Everybody talking about choice is only charter. Like, if it's a magnet school that your child got in, you're likely going to hear about the experiences of kids of color. And don't let them be, from, abject poverty and in those schools. They experience something that they really like, you really don't belong here. Mm-hmm. Even if your test score says you do.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Can I, and hopefully I'm not, out of turn by jumping in, but I think when we talk about that mobilization and informing our people, like, I think there's a few things that need to happen. One, I also just shared another partnership that I've done with Ed Post Brightbeam, the Agentic Black Parent, where we've gone around the country and we've trained people to do exactly what you said, like, hey, here's how you analyze this. Here's the questions that you ask. But before we even talk about a teacher, before we even talk about a school, let's do this homework. Let's like, yo, do you know your child? Do you even know these questions that we're about to go ask? Like, and I have somebody break down and cry every single time we've done it. And it's because they just didn't know, and deep down, many of them didn't think that they or their child deserved anything better. So there's a lot of guilt in our communities, and we can get real deep into that. But I know we're coming towards the close. But I think the other thing is there needs to be a shift in mindset. I'm not a parent. I don't even need to think about this as my own child is here or there, whatever. Think about this for your community. Think about this for like what the future is going to be. And again, I know that a lot of old heads, and I'm entering that phase of my life where we're seeing shifts. And like, yes, our kids are becoming smarter, but there are also some values that we are losing as well. And it's like, yo, like we are, you know, Sharif, you said something, you might have said it in the chat, or you might have said it here, or maybe it was you, Ish, but our kids are dropping in a lot of places, but the one place they're not dropping is confidence. And confidence without education becomes ignorance. It becomes you know, like cockiness. You know what I'm saying? Undeserved cockiness. And again, man, and again, I love a lot of the directions that we're going in a lot of ways, but there are some things that we have to go back and own. And I'll end my point on this. You guys remember when we had those fathers come on 8 Black Hands in Chicago? I think they were in Chicago or somewhere.
Louisiana.
They were in Louisiana.
Yeah.
They didn't wait this. So just for the people that's listening, there was a group of fathers. They didn't ask for permission. They was tired of the stuff that they saw, and they organized. It started out with just a few of them, but they started to make their presence known at that school campus or in the streets around there. And then they kind of caught on. Like our people have to lead in our communities. Schools serve communities. You know what I mean? Like the community has to be the boss of that. And there are a lot of us and our ancestors that when things weren't going that way, like, yo, they made a change. And I just think that it's going to be easy to always beat up on a broken system that is never going to serve us well. It's just not. Like, I'm not trying to sound hopeless, but I mean, how long, how many decades, how many generations do you have to keep hearing the same shit? And then in the next post, and Chris has been getting on the Andrew Tates of the world, you going online talking about you a man, but your community's in shambles and it's your kids. And you scared to talk up and speak on behalf of your kid to a teacher? You scared to step into a school building and talk to a principal? Like, you have to own it. We have to own it at some point. And you just got to know that dog ain't gonna hunt. So stop telling me about the dog. Tell me about the trainer.
Y'all hear the Paducah come out of him? Just that dog don't hunt. Here come Paducah. That dog don't hunt. It's Paducah. I told you he was the god of Paducah.
See, that's why your mic messed up. God don't like ugly.
But as you were talking, there's this, you know, where I go with this a lot is it's on us in a lot of ways, right? And I'm starting. This is my radical thought. I'm always coming across radical thoughts now, and I'm starting to get more radical. I'm starting to think that the system isn't broken, and it's not broken not just because of what we always say, like it's doing what it's designed to do and all that. I'm saying it's broken. I'm saying it's broken because a big part of it is you get out of it what you put into it. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of different groups that it's broken for, supposedly, who are going in those buildings and coming out with an education. And in this, I'm thinking a lot of, the Africans and immigrants and others who come into the same systems we're going to, but they have a different situation now. I don't want to get into this discussion where we go into ruckus territory, where we do the Cosby pound cake thing, right? But there's always two sides of the self-determination coin. There's the Cosby side and there's the Malcolm X side of the same coin, right? And on the Malcolm X side of the coin, you got Malcolm X and you've got Garvey and Garveyites and all that other stuff, like do for self. Don't sit around talking about what the system's not doing for you, because you better understand that like, when's that going to stop being the truth, right? So when I think about reading proficiency, for instance, and you talk about proficiency, first of all, I say the same thing every time. Proficiency is a very low bar. So if we're not even getting kids to proficiency, because proficiency isn't mastery. Mastery would be if we had so many kids not reaching mastery, I would think that was a different problem. right? I think, but proficiency is so low that you could probably teach your kid at home to get to proficiency, right? You could just put books in their hands and read to them a lot and do other things if proficiency were really the goal. But we're not even hitting that. And I just want to keep saying this for the record too. I don't want to put this on us because every group of people in the United States, every student subgroup is not doing as well as they should be doing. Right. Like, let's just get that straight up right across. There is no, we're all knocking it out of the park. And especially when you get to Ish's point, to things like science. We always talk about math and reading. We don't talk about is them shitty ass science scores that the United States gets. 26% of white students score well on the science part of this, which is why we have so many dummies in America, because you definitely can't think critically if you can't think like a scientist. But anyways, I feel like I went a couple of different places there. The main point that I'm trying to make right now is, when does it just become about us? When does it just become about, like, listen, don't complain until you have actually done what you're supposed to be doing for your own kids. Because every other group is looking at you silently. They're thinking, y'all keep complaining, but that's on you. That's a you problem. That's not a us problem.
You and us. But yeah, I agree. I think it always goes back to messaging and mindset as well, right? Because you can give that message, but if you have contempt with the people who are receiving the message, then it's going to come out in a certain way. It's going to come out, putting them down instead of pulling them up, right? There's a difference. And some people give you feedback and give you, truth in a way, but it's so concealed in all this negativity that you're actually pushing them off of a cliff instead of pulling them up, on the precipice. And I think that's how I look at those two types of messages, because, Baldwin even, yesterday we kicked off training our coaches who will be working with the high school and college teacher apprentices. Right. And so one of the things that we're sharing is exactly what you just said. Like, yeah, system, this, all of that. But right now, you're going to be in front of potential future teachers. And you can go in and just talk about the system. That's not going to make them a better teacher. Right? Like, they should be aware, because, having clarity and, having political clarity, I think, is extremely important as part of the mindset. But it also goes beyond that as far as, like, what's your content expertise? Political clarity with no content expertise, that's not teaching. You know what I mean? Because you're saying all the things that are wrong, but you're part of what's wrong because you're not teaching well. Right. And so I think, it's this, again, I draw from what our Black thought leaders have always said, right? Like, it's very new things, as the context may have changed, right? But as far as, like, what they said, what they warned us about, whether it's Carter G. Woodson, psychologist Amos Wilson, James Baldwin, Malcolm X, all the Black women educators who were building schools and designing pedagogical frameworks for us to use, all of them are saying the same exact thing. We just keep, just treating it like, it's on the shelf and just let it collect dust and not implementing it. It's like the implementation of what they already said. Carter G. Woodson already said, like, no matter what school you go to, if you're a Black child, make sure that you're expanding it so largely, and the parents and community, make sure you're enhancing it so much that it's not just relying on any curriculum that's thrown in front of them, right? Because if you rely on that, and he's saying this 1900s, if you rely on that for a Black kid, it's not going to be good enough. He's like, because white kids, even if they have that same curriculum, guaranteed the larger ecosystem that they're getting their education from is helping propel them forward with their connections, with their intern, like all of that. He was saying this in 1900. And now we become invested in systems and forgot about all the other pieces in an organized way, not just, here's an after school program for these 3 kids. And I don't want to disparage that. Like, every bit helps. But we have to think about that more of a communal, like, everywhere should be like Harlem Children's Zone type of things, right? Why is that like that? Oh yeah, where they're like, oh yeah, they do that up in Harlem for 3,000 miles. Like, every community should have something very similar, from prenatal all the way to post-grad, right? Like, that is what our folks were talking about. That is how we wrapped ourselves around the community. And it's just become, less and less and less of that, which means that the safety net, the holes in the safety net became wider and wider and wider.
Can I veggie back off of that real quick, just off the historical angle, just to connect it? Because I'm reading Education of Blacks in the South right now, Dr. James Anderson, which is brilliant too. Thanks for the suggestion, Sharif. But in it, you see right after the end of enslavement period, people took their education and responsibility of their children's education on their own, even giving up the little bit of money and funds that they had to help build schools in order for their children to attend. Now, as soon as white philanthropists' money started to invade and also determine this is what you need to do in order to reach this, you will not get this loan, this grant money. These people will get this grant money because they co-sign our program. That's where I always get concerned with, because just like you were saying before, like we have the blueprint, we have the plan, like it's been working in different parts and all this. Yet at the same time, there is also another blueprint and plan from moneyed interest that look at education as a gold mine, and as another gold mine in order to extract and exploit. And our children are the things being extracted and exploited too much under these systems, right? With a new program, with another SEL type of way of like having your children be more docile under a system that is oppressing them. And so for me, I always get concerned about that aspect happening, because like we do, Dr. Cole, and I really appreciate you kind of like saying we need to stop complaining about these people. We need to start thinking about how we take responsibility and building up our own. I get concerned that that other element is also sometimes being neglected, in the sense of, I look at in Pennsylvania right now, we have Jay-Z promoting vouchers, right? I got my freaking face on the side of a truck saying this is why parents should have school choice in Philadelphia. So like, where's that money coming from? Why isn't that money being invested in the new school buildings in Philadelphia, where the average age is about 70 years? So all these other things, I get concerned that it will be manipulated, used, co-opted, and then at the end of the day, in 10 years, we'll be having the same conversation about how our children are struggling, how our communities are suffering, and that we need to do something, or that the system's wrong. While at the same time, it's like, we know the disease. Why do we keep on just trying to deal with the symptoms instead of going to that root of the disease and having an honest conversation? How do we build our own without reliance or the watchful white gaze? I don't know.
I think about everything that Charles always talks about, like being agentic, right? And Charles, you put up this, in our chat here, you put up the agentic black parent, book that he did. And if folks want to find it, you go to edpost.com/the-agentic-black-parent, and you'll find this report. This doesn't cost any money, really, for you to be armed, and to be like, if you wanted to be a learning revolutionary, if you wanted to break the cycle of everything we're talking about, there are things that are available to you that don't require white philanthropy. Someone's going to listen to this and disagree with me. Even if you had a design concept for a school, you could start a whole charter school just based on existing public funds, right? There are people that can help you write the charter and get the concept down right. And you can have a ish kind of rule. I don't take money from big white philanthropy. I work strictly within the public and the public funds. I have an idea for a school. I'm closest to the issue, which means I'm closest to the solution. Not even close. I am the solution, right? So I feel like this is kind of you just gave us a good guardrail. Don't get bought out. That should be our job, is to flood the zone with the how-tos. My dude who, wrote The War on Black Boys or whatnot has been putting out books for years.
Kwanzaa Kunjufu, baby.
Right. And he's just putting out the books that, like if you wanted to just buy his whole catalog, right? I can't think of a better way to get armed with like something. Now that's not free, but I'm just saying, Charles is putting out a lot of this. The other thing I was going to say, Ish, to your point, and Charles, I wish this is something that you do in a report. I love to give other people work, but here's years ago, we studied 2 zip codes in Minneapolis that had so much philanthropy money and nonprofit industrial complex money going through it that you would swear to God that the kids should be like, they should be Rhodes Scholars, right? Like with the amount of money that was going through those, just the 2 poorest zip codes. Like you start adding it all up, all the grants, all the foundations, all the nonprofits, all the after school, before school, during school programs, the community in schools, the communities out of schools, all that stuff, right? That was so much money. I would love to know how much Oakland is raising on the heads of kids whose lives aren't being made any.
Yeah, and look at the salaries as the money that's being invested. Look at the salaries that kind of, people count that as part of the investment, but that's actually not investment. It's like adjacent to.
Well, I will say a lot of philanthropy has left Oakland. Like Oakland is no longer the apple of the eye, right? But I think I appreciate the conversation that we're having, man. I think we're starting to cook now. One, that is a great book to read. You should definitely read that book. And I think another book that people should read with it, and I know y'all have read it, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Listen, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat.
Everybody should not read that. That should be
not everybody. I'm talking about the people that watch this show. That's right.
Certain things people have to graduate too, Cole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, bruh, censor yourself. You know what I'm saying?
You're right. I'm sorry, brother. But here's the thing. People don't read, so it's fine. It don't matter.
They can't.
I put a lot.
According to your report, they can't.
Right. And shout out to Jawanza Kunjufu, who's here in Chicago and very accessible, who is also blackballed, right? Like, I would say this, man. I think that there are different roles that people have. I think that the role that a Sharif plays is different from the role that I play. He's very optimistic, and he's able to see things differently. And I'm like, but it works when you're organized. I think Chris talks about organizing a lot. I also think that one of the things that in my initial research when I was becoming this whole with the letters thing or whatever, doctor or whatever, was the biggest finding was education mattered to those kids that ended up becoming successful, and it mattered to their parents. And the most important thing that those parents did was fight for quality education in front of those children to where those children adopted and saw value in education. Right now, education is cold product. But I hope most people know what cold product is. But basically, it's losing its value. It's losing its street value. It's losing like there's not enough value. There's more value in being able to talk about being smart than actually being smart. And I think that or being educated. It's not just about like smarts or things like that. Like there are things our community needs. Like if we like listen, man. If the toilet breaks, it's $300 to come look at it. Like, you're going to pay that. It just is a thing. I just think that this is a great conversation because we're taking a lot of complicated things and there's a lot of different ways to break it down. But it has to start with us. One, we have to believe that our kids can learn and that we deserve better than what we're getting. I don't care what you've done. I had two parents that I visited in jail. I had two parents that was on crack for a long time, but they got clean. They're not on that no more. And they went and got educated and they still together. Like as long as you got air in your lungs, God can redeem you. Like I want to just start there because there's so much deep-seated stuff, and that comes from my social work side of things. Two, like know that like in the book that you're talking about that Dr. Anderson wrote, if somebody's giving you something, they're going to want something in return. Nothing is free. So let's not act like children around this thing, right? Know what you're getting into. Know what your negotiables are. Know what you will not just compromise on and have your principles, but then don't take the stuff and then bitch about it. Like if it's going to be that, then like we are adults. And finally, man, like as long as we keep handing our history and our future to other people to deal with, to cope with, to make sense of that ain't of you and not for you, stop being surprised when they put their own people before yours. Like, you cannot be in a war against people, slap somebody, and be mad when they punch you back. Understand and know what is coming. And these are just common sense things that we got to get back into. I know we are in an oversensitive time. I know that it might be needed, but pendulums kind of overswing. But if we're going to fight for this community and fight for us, be ready for people to punch back and get a tough jaw. Because as Common said, life is a teacher and you are going to get tested. So like, that just because you got tested and you might not have done well doesn't mean you stop or you fail. It doesn't mean Philadelphia stops building or Detroit stops building or Chicago stops building. It means, we take that jab and now we got to learn how to do that and hook that back, So I again, not to get too excited in this, but I just think y'all all said some really dope stuff and I wanted to try to crystallize it on some level because they don't get to see us outside of this. They don't get to see those moments if I'm down and Chris or Sharif is like, hey man, you gotta get your ass off your shoulders, bro. Like what are we doing, dog? Like I got your back, I'm here with you, but you gotta man up, or you gotta be a man, or you gotta be a woman, or if this is ours and we say that we want it to be ours, then are you gonna fight for it or not? Or you just gonna hand your kids off?
That's so
Yeah,
much.
I don't know what that term means, but I think I
Which one?
understand. Get your ass off your shoulders.
I just had a visual. I was like sitting here like, damn, how's that possible?
It means
Not quite sure, but I understood everything that also was said around it. So I was like,
this is and
see, if
because
that
he's
was on the
literate,
standardized test, I probably would fail that question. I would not answer that correctly. Like,
let me
what does
show you
this mean?
Sharif's proficiency and mastery. He didn't understand it, but he used context clues in the conversation. That's literacy. But no, what it means is don't get so depressed and down on yourself. Stop thinking that you're not worthy. And because you're not worthy, you're self-harming and you're self-harming your community. Again, like I live in a place like Oakland that's super depressed right now. Like the whole place. Like there is just, our mayor just got indicted, or not indicted, but the feds raided her house yesterday. Like there's encampments, there's homeless encampments everywhere. You know what I'm saying? It's easy to become very depressed and nihilistic. We don't talk about the nihilism in our community, and not to get super philosophical, but I would love to actually have more of that conversation. Maybe I'll write another report.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about, as soon as you start hitting the ground for despair, like you need your community to like, pump you back up. And because the road that despair takes you down and, it starts spiraling. Right. And then, so we have to, when they say about like hope is the fuel of the revolutionary, it really means like, it doesn't mean that hope where you're like, blindly just, joyful looking at it, but it's like, you know what, like this brick that I'm going to lay for this road is going to help, and I'm going to add more bricks, and we're going to get more people to add bricks. And again, I don't expect to see any of this. I'm in my 50s. I don't expect to see any of this to where we are all working to address, but I believe it will, come about. I do think things will improve, but it's going to take the amount of discipline and organization and mobilization and investment, our own investment that it's going to take is going to be, astronomical. But we've seen pockets of it, right? So we should know, like, oh, it can happen, but how do we do it at scale? For one, that's the challenge. But unbowed, unbent, like I think that's where the stubbornness and determination, stubbornness, whatever you want to do, like that's when we got to like make sure we keep self-injecting that part.
As we wrap, there's simple things that can start now that could be happening. Like we don't have to wait. The revolution is not coming on some other day. It starts with very simple acts and basic acts. I think one of them, people listening to this right now, you can get the agentic Black parent, and you can start there. We can start challenging, spread it around. I mean, listen, there was a time in my life where I had to rely on programs to pay my rent and to keep my heat on. And to keep food in my refrigerator. And what's so interesting to me was how much help I had in terms of people that already had been through that or were on it themselves, who taught me how the system works, right? Very quickly. Like, this is how you get X, this is how you make such and such, blah, 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 right? Quick tutorials that, some nonprofit could have done or whatnot, but they were too busy trying to keep me in the situation I was in. But, it's funny how much peer group information can save your life sometimes, right? Like, on how a system works. That might be the revolution we need, like parent to parent, person to person, church to church, not waiting for some big thing to happen, not some big grant or whatever. The other thing and the last thing that I'll say about all of this is that we have all these organizations that don't have education on their agenda, right? As they're like, and I think this is because of what Ish said before. I know this just, after George Floyd in Minnesota, like $100 million came to town. $100 million. That went through a nonprofit that had 4 white leaders on it. And it had some name that was like, Black, like it was like our thing, right? And that $100 million went into things like defund the police and other things, stuff we wasn't even asking for, right? But none of it, a lot of it went into being out in the street protests and all that type of stuff. None of it went to education. None of it went to getting yourself out of the situation you're actually in with education. And I think that's kind of our issue right now, is that our nonprofit industrial complex and our protesting industrial complex and our parent organizing industrial complex, none of it is geared towards education. None of it. Even when it says it's education, it's about things like, choice or more money for teachers or stuff that never even gets to kids, right? So I don't know what I'm saying in that, except to say NAACP, you should have a person. Urban League, you should have a person. I don't know all the names of the sororities and them Greekish people or whatever, but all them people, whoever you got, you should have a person, right? All of y'all should. When I go to your websites, I see like economic development, criminal justice, all the core kit, and never education. I don't know why that is. Anyways, I'm off my soapbox. What's your last word, fellas? What do y'all say?
Well, I guess I can just jump in real quick and say that, this is very complex and complicated, and we're dealing with like larger existential issues, right? Dr. Cole, I appreciate you bringing up the nihilism that is real in our community, but also like Huey P. Newton wrote Revolutionary Suicide. So he was talking about that concept then, right? And we probably go back and read other folks who also referenced it in relation to the Black experience in the American nightmare, right? But I think it's so important to really like prod people and be like, oh yeah, that's all well true. That's the reality. Now we need all hands on deck, and it's by any means necessary. So you're able to do this. Okay, that's what you need to do. How do we organize this? How do we bring people together where folks are on the same page? And that's the type of time that I would love to be in when we're talking about education. I would like to also touch upon the fact that teacher prep programs don't necessarily prepare people who become teachers. We've already referenced that before, but also the support necessary that teachers need inside schools. You need leadership like what Sharif El-Mekki provided and other people have provided, and in order to even cultivate and allow teachers to grow those skill sets within those school buildings. But like when it comes to all down to it, at the end of the day, I think all of us really need to be honest that we're not good where we're at. We need to shift direction, and that we need to stop putting lipstick on the pig, to bring it back to what Dr. Cole said earlier.
Mm.
Yeah. I think again, shout out to Cole for his the reports and getting. I think a big part is like making sure people have access to the information, getting it out, and I also love that he doesn't try to take this ivory tower approach in the reports, right? Like it's accessible to making it plain. Like that's one reason I love Malcolm, right? Because he made it plain. He brought wit and wisdom and matched that together, right? And brought that like level of cleverness, but also making it so plain that people like, whether it's Harlem on one of those literal soapbox of crates that they would stand on to talk on a corner, or at the United Nations or globally, right? Like, and just so I see that kind of commitment in Cole's Cole's work, which I think is really important. I think the other thing at the base of all of this, when communities decide that it's not the schools or the districts or the government's job to educate our children, even if they have a school, it's actually our job. That is part of the apparatus, but it's not like we are educating our children. So yes, they may go into that building for X amount of hours a day, or they may not. Like if they do, but we also looking at like the education of our children. It's not even just the parents' responsibility. That's the thing. I always get annoyed because I always hear, "There's the parent should be doing. The parent should be the parent." Da, da, da. It's actually a community's responsibility to make sure that children are being educated, because that education that you're providing, it also may be needed by the parent.
Mm-hmm.
So just to keep saying, like I'm almost like sick of hearing about like what parent responsibility is, and I'm not, advocating that we don't have that. But it's still that's still an individualistic approach. And we will get nowhere far with this individualized mindset. Like, well, I took care of my kid. That's your job and your responsibility to take care of your kid because your kid's out of control. That kid is a part of your neighborhood, part of your community, part of the ecosystem. And if you keep looking at it like that, we're not going anywhere far.
Yep. Yep. Quickly, just a fun fact for you, Ish. I went to the same elementary school as Huey P. Newton, and we launched this report and the last 3 reports at that same hallowed ground that we do every year that we do them. And I like the pamphlet model that our ancestors had. That's what ebooks are for me. And it allows me to take some of that other money and or whatever I make in my business and give back to my community. So if you are struggling with any of these things, reach out. There's ample trainers. If the book ain't enough, you can find me talking about it and sitting with you. I think the to end for me, it would be my awareness, navigation, and duty. Hopefully from this conversation and this larger thought of education discussion, one, I hope you leave here more aware of that our kids are aware of this stuff. Our kids do have confidence and think that they're doing well. And it's disheartening when they learn these things and they want to learn. You are now aware of this. Navigation is something that we always talk about on A Black Hands, but people got to go back to school on Monday. They gotta, the system's jacked up, but how are you helping them navigate right now? And they're going to do the best they can. Being aware of that and also still pushing the line while making sure people are still okay right now. How do you navigate what is the current reality? But finally, duty. Now that you've had exposure to this stuff, now that you know about these links and now that you know about these books and you know about these people, and maybe you like Sharif's approach, or maybe you like Chris's, or maybe you like Ish's, you got 4 different corners of a square that is trying to cover and solve the same type of problem. Pick your flavor, but you now have a duty to do something about it, or you can't complain about it. You're going to get in the game or you not. And I know there's a lot more money in complaining, the same way there's a lot more money in the medicine and the cure, but we got to break from that if we want to see our community thrive, because guess what, man? Black people, we still 12, 13% of this country. Everybody else is fluctuating or going down, and people are thinking about that stuff. And how are we thinking about it for ourselves and moving forward? So I appreciate y'all for having me. Both reports are on EdPost. Thank y'all for being such a great partner. And anything else that I can do to help or be of assistance, please just let me know. And you give me a report idea, Chris, and I'm happy to get on it.
Well, your open invitation. This is your house. So come back as often as you want to and whenever you have something. For people listening and watching, this has been another episode of Freedom Friday. And you're still not free. You're not. I'm sorry. I hate to inform you. You're just not. You're just not. But if you want to be, keep following these discussions and have them with each other. Have them on Sundays. Have them in your living room. Have them at church. And contact any of us. If you really want to reach out, you can reach Dr. Cole. If you go to his website, tell them your website, Charles.
CharlesColeIII.com. That's CharlesColeIII.com.
Now, Sharif El-Mekki is the leader of the Center for Black Educators.
Sharif, you should probably say yours because Chris is free.
www.thecenterblacked.org.
There you go.
www.thecenterblacked.org.
And Ish, we don't want people contacting you right now because they act ignorant when they contact you for right now. So we need to just protect you from ignorance right now. Take care, brother.